Welcome to Behind the Muscle podcast. Today's guest is a physique and mindset coach. Today's guest is Dillon Phaneuf. Dillon, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate the invite. It's been pretty cool to see kind of some of the, peers and acquaintances I've seen on the show so far. So it was an easy yes for me just because I looked through and I saw some of my own mentors and coaches, sprinkled out throughout this podcast. And I think what you're doing is really cool. So I'm excited to have a conversation, brother.
Excellent, man. All right, Dillon. So the first question I kind of like to ask all of my guests just to kind of get the conversational ball rolling, so to speak, is who are a few of your favorite bodybuilders of all time?
Sure. So first one off the top of my head, Franco Columbu. I found, Arnold was like one of the first bodybuilders that I came across his information, when I started getting into weightlifting. And through that, I also found Franco. And I just thought it was really cool. I'm not a professional by any means, but I have a little bit of martial arts and mixed martial arts, hobby background as well. I thought it was cool that he was like a boxer. He could just go and like lift 700 pounds, deadlift a car, and also look like a little brick tank. And being a short guy myself, and not genetically, let's say, apt, and I'm very small boned, I'm a small person. So I thought like that would be something that I could aim at as like an attainable physique, something I liked. It's very appealing to me. When I got to meet him later in life before he passed at like my second Arnold, and he was like an elderly man, just he was with like a chiropractic company at one of their booths, and no one was talking to him. So I ended up talking to him for like an hour and a half. And when someone's your kind of your hero in some sense, or you idolize them, and you get that much of their time, and he was so gracious with his time, it just stuck in my head. So like he's just a great man from the experience that I had, and I liked all the accomplishments that he had done too. A second one for sure, as I see the shadow hanging on your wall behind your head, Dorian, I just really liked that he was my opinion of a thinking man's bodybuilder. He took what was kind of going on in his sphere at the time and went like, okay, that seems applicable to me, but based on what I've learned through my studies, these things don't seem applicable to me. Just a very logical type person, and I feel like I relate to that. I don't relate to the physique at all. This man is a complete monster compared to me, what I'll ever be. But at least the mindset wise, I found it very cool to see like, wow, someone with that type of physique is thinking these things out in the step-by-step map procedure that we don't always hear from people in that position, let's say.
Okay, now sometimes I like to ask, and I'm going to ask this as kind of a follow-up question to the question I just asked you in terms of the all-time favorite bodybuilders. Are there any athletes currently in the IFBB that you admire, you look up to, you respect their physique, you respect kind of their mind, or however you want to take that? What are some of the current athletes that you kind of look up to or really like?
Sure. I really like Terrence Ruffin. Wasn't maybe his best showing, let's say, this last year, but honestly, and I know his training coach, Joe, pretty well. I did a little bit of a mentorship with Joe in biomechanics once upon a time. And, Terrence has always just been super polite. I like the way his physique flows. I think he's got a really pretty package. I like the way that he presents it, and I like him as a person. So you'll notice that there's some themes where I've actually got to talk to a lot of the people that I really look up to, and maybe bodybuilding is for sure a portion of why I'm looking up to them, but it's usually not the only thing. And Ian Valier would probably be if I was to choose a bodybuilder at this time that I really looked up to. And again, I just spent we had him at our stores a few weekends ago for a big tour. I just traveled around, with Ian, and I've met him multiple times. And, now I would kind of consider after this last relationship building around that, I just got to know him a lot more as a person. I just think he's an absolutely beautiful human. I think he's a down to earth Canada prairie boy, true at heart. His dad's not too far from where I kind of grew up. So a lot of kind of interesting stories came about there. And, not too often you get to kind of end up smoking a few joints in the evening with one of the world's best bodybuilders. So that was a great experience for me as well.
Excellent. All right, Dillon. So why don't you tell us a little bit about when you started lifting weights And then why did you start lifting weights at that specific age?
Sure. So the why I did is pretty easy. It's maybe an interesting story. So I grew up very obese. My entire childhood, I was like, basically you look at pictures of me at like 6 years old. I'm like twice the size that a 6-year-old should be. So basically, as far back as my memory cognitively can remember, I had been obese. Um, I worked on a farm and stuff. So it was just like my portions were made by a grown man who was also overweight. And it was like, you have to eat these portions or you're not leaving the table kind of thing. So I just got accustomed to literally eating like a grown man by the time I was 8 years old, and not a grown man who was necessarily in eating the right amount of calories, let's say. And, so very, very kind of strict upbringing in that sense. And then also having a religious undertone of belief. I thought that I was supposed to be that way. I grew up in a very, very small farming community, and the type of place where my teachers taught my parents, my uncle, etc. And it was kind of like, well, that's how you Phaneufs are. You're all big boys. That's how everyone is. And I just literally thought like, that's the way I am. And lo and behold, when I was about 21, I had a construction materials sales career. I went up a 4.5-story building to check on something, and I ended up falling through the roof. So I fell 45 feet. I broke my L1 through L5, both heels, my left ankle, my right elbow, and I had some concussive issues. And I'm sure you can relate to this. I was like just turned 21 years old, or no, I think it was maybe even a week before my 21st birthday. And I think I had been to the doctor like 2 times from doing something stupid, like, breaking my ribs playing hockey or something. But I certainly wasn't going to get like metabolic panels and different health things as a 20-year-old male. When I fell, and because I'm so injured, they obviously pulled my blood work, et cetera, et cetera. Well, it comes back that basically I'm so pre-diabetic that I probably need diabetic interventions through medication. My blood pressure needs medication now, cholesterol medication now. So all of a sudden you're lying in a bed wondering if your right leg's ever going to work, if you're going to walk properly, if you're going to even heal up to the way that you potentially were before, which wasn't a good starting point. And now I'm not even 21 years old, and I need a statin and a bunch of different medications to just make my life go round. And just to save some story time, it took me probably 3 months post getting out of the hospital, to which I got addicted to prescription painkillers. And that was kind of that rock bottom. I remember my mom coming over, we had a discussion, and, I was highly addicted to the pain pills at this time. I kind of flushed them all down the toilet in one day. And it was like, okay, I got to start doing something. I don't know what to do, but I need to do something. So that's what led me to start going to the gym. Just like everyone else, it was like, I didn't know what I was doing, but hey, let's go try do some movements. Let's start looking into things. I'm a very inquisitive and resourceful person. So when I got looking into things, it didn't take me long to understand that, like, oh, okay. And I found calorie balance pretty soon and realized, like, okay, maybe I am eating too much. And the first questions for me were like, it was curious because I could even see if it was possible. Because luckily I wasn't one of those people who was like, oh, I'm overweight, I need to do keto and then fail. And then, oh, another 6 months or a year later, oh, I'm overweight still, I need to do this and fail. I decided one time to lose weight and try and change my life 10 years ago. And now it's me now. I've never regressed since then. I just made a decision in some sense. And that simplifies a very difficult journey down too much probably. But, once I made the choice, started going to the gym, and then it took me about 2 years. I lost 150 pounds. I went right from obese to the stage, which was a horrible idea because I was 140 pounds on stage and still not in condition. Because there's this idea when you're overweight that like I'm big boned, or like I had this idea that when I was near 300 pounds, that if I lost 100, man, it would just be something else. And then I lost 100 when I got there. I was like, this sucks still. It's not at all what I thought this was going to look like. In fact, I might like it less because now I'm thinking about it. And before, I just never really thought about myself from a physique objectivity standpoint. So, right to the stage, getting dead last. And that's a tough pill to swallow. when you're subjectively the best you've ever been by far, and objectively still not even ready to compete in an actual sense of competing. But I got hooked. I was really addicted to the bodybuilding training. I liked the discipline. As someone who's maybe, let's say, as my parents or teachers would say, that I never applied myself. And if I did, maybe I would see some greatness come out. It was the first thing that intrigued me, where like I could take the personal responsibility. I had control of my own destiny. I knew the differences in how I felt. Like after I lost 100 pounds, I'd be walking around, the dealership job that I had at the time. It felt like I was flying. And that's when I started to think like, wow, if I could help other people do this and feel this would be something that would be really interesting to get into. And I'll leave you with this before I stop my large rant. When it's interesting now to look back on, because almost 10 years ago to the day, I remember walking in my sales manager's office at the time. I was working in a dealership. It was lunchtime. There was a whole bunch of guys in there. And then sometimes I would go to the gym on my lunch hour. So I went to the gym on my lunch hour, and I remember watching a bunch of guys that were probably realistically my size and maybe a little bit bigger. They were like 200 to 240. Let's say there was like 3 of them. They were squatting and doing some different exercises. I remember thinking like, I want to train those people. I don't know how, and I don't know when, but that would be cool. Like I was just watching what they were doing, moving, like 5-plate Smith squats, ass to grass, pause. And I was just like, that's the people I want to be around. I went back and I told this to everyone, and it was like, I lost 100 pounds, still didn't have abs. It's like, I don't know if that's really a good career choice. You make pretty good money here. Maybe you shouldn't give up your day job. And, a couple of months ago, I took on my first pro athlete, so it's like, well, if it's proof that if you stay diligent long enough and keep trying to improve, you never know what can happen anyway.
Excellent. All right. Now, while you were kind of talking about how you got into lifting, you kind of mentioned a little bit in passing about your childhood and your upbringing, but I want to kind of expound. I want you to expound a little bit more, Dillon, on your childhood, your upbringing. So you mentioned now you grew up in Canada, right?
Yes,
okay.
sir.
So you grew up in Canada, farming community. You obviously you said that you were obese as a child from as far back as you can remember. Now, I want you to paint the picture a little bit more of your upbringing, your childhood. You said you worked on a farm. I mean, was that like, were you doing the farm work like before school and after school? Did you play sports? Like, just talk a little bit more about the activities of Dillon growing up, please.
Sure. So pretty interesting. This is one of the things that I'll try not to drag on too much, but I grew up in a small town of about, I actually grew up outside of a small town of 500 people on like a secluded farm. So where I went to school, there was and it was a very poor community. From kindergarten to grade 12 had 150 students, and it was all one school. And how old are you, Quentin?
35. I'll be 36.
35. So you're a little older than me. So I'll be 32 here right away. When I crossed into high school in grade 6, there's just like a corridor. You walk across, now you're in high school, walking grade 6, grade 12, you're passing in the hallway type thing. We still had the beaver tail strap at my school. Meaning if you were bad, and I'm not that old, bro. This is like 20 years outdated. This is like shit you'd see in the 70s. Not in the mid 90s, we were bad as kids, we would either have to do manual labor or usually get physical abused. It's like we would dig post holes for the fence line of the schoolyards. If there was posts needing repounding and stuff, that's what we would do. Or we would just so you can imagine like and my dad was a very calloused, very hard person, and I don't mean I say that with speaking from love. I bless him for giving that to me, especially in today's environment, because it gave me such an edge. But I was raised in like what you would consider like 50s, 60s hard ranch life. So we had a pretty big grain operation. So yes, I was always working before schools. I always worked after school. There was no guarantee. In harvest time, everyone would go back to school in September. I would go back in November. I didn't start school till the end of when the harvest was done. That's when my dad would allow me to go to school, because he viewed school as being like a secondary important to the family way of making money and monetizing our lives and taking care of everyone that we care about. So I got to learn a lot of responsibility very young. By the time I was 13, My dad, in the winter, he really liked ice fishing. I grew up in Saskatchewan. For anyone that knows about Canada, it's a very small, secluded place, very beautiful north, in the Canadian Shield. He had a fishing camp up north that was about 6 hours away. He would leave January 1st and come home in March. And my parents were divorced and I lived with him. So I would be 13 and I had to plow the snow with a tractor in a giant compound so that the bus could pick me up for school. I had to cut wood every morning at 5 o'clock in the morning and put it in the boiler so that his grain didn't spoil and I didn't die if that happened. And so that I had hot water to fuel my shower to get ready for school and do my cooking and all these type of things. So I had a very disciplined, regimented upbringing. There was never a moment where I didn't know where my time was going to be allocated in some sense. I did actually play sports, even though I was obese, because I was always a decently sharp kid, I guess, and hopefully a grown man, but maybe I've got dumber, that I would place myself in areas. So I'm ambidextrous, for instance. I can use both hands to do the exact same things for the most part. I was pretty good at badminton because I had a wingspan that was like 12 feet long because I would just throw the racket in the other hand and I never had a backhand. So I actually did pretty good at badminton because there was a lot of strategy involved in that. I was pretty good at volleyball because I was a setter. So I'm just parked in front of the net and I only have to go from each side of the net. I'm not running back and forth. I had like a stationary position, soft hands. That's what my coach used to say. I was very good at ping pong, hand-eye coordination, strategy, all that type of stuff. I was very good at golf and martial arts. So I did a lot of golfing and martial arts. Those were kind of the two things I did most of the time. The other stuff was just like school sports, intramurals, all that type of stuff. But I played pretty competitive golf, like quite competitive actually, and semi-competitive judo as well. So I was into martial arts a little bit and golfing. And, as I got older, I still do some of those things now, but I don't take them quite, they're hobbies that suck up a lot of time. And as we were talking about pre-episode, my time is sucked pretty dry with what I got going on right now. So I hope that paints a picture of kind of, how I grew up, just a very kind of hard knocks, blue collar upbringing. I had, a lot of discipline instilled into me, a lot of responsibility, a lot of duty. And I think that's part of why people are attracted to my brand, because I bring some of that forth into a marketplace that it's not really that popular right now, let's say.
Okay. Now I want to ask you this, Dillon, in terms of having that, what you kind of said, hard upbringing, did at any point when you were younger, or maybe after you got out of your dad's house, did you ever hold any type of resentment towards your dad because of that hard upbringing? Because obviously probably other kids maybe had a little bit more of a what we would say a looser upbringing. Did you ever hold any resentment towards your dad because of the hardness, and maybe you weren't able to, live as a kid maybe should growing up, or not really?
Yeah, so this is a great question. And, thanks for asking a deep question. It's my kind of conversation. Yeah, I'll try to make this as, like, let's say, graphically friendly as possible. I left home before my 16th birthday, and I don't mean like left home like, oh, I went and stayed at my friend's couch. No, I'm in a different city. I'm lied about my age to get a job at a potash mine so that I could support myself, and I'm looking after myself. I was doing my grade 11 and kind of 12 at the same time while I was working full time. And the reason that I did that is because I knew that within 365 days between 16 and 17, because I started to turn into a little bit more of a man, that me or my dad would be dead. And I still stand by that. I would be dead or he would be dead. If I had stayed one more year, that's the path we were headed down for sure. And we came very close to getting escalated to that high already. So I was smart enough to know I don't want to end up a statistic that ends up in this situation, regardless of what end I'm on. And, I need to make a change. And I knew it was going to be difficult to go out on my own. What the fuck does a 15-year-old know about life? Absolutely nothing. But I figured it out enough to get out. And to answer your question, yeah, there was definitely a lot of resent there. And I come from a pretty successful farming background, to where I would probably have been as successful by 20 as I am right now after a decade of putting all this work into fitness. All my businesses, it's the craziest thing. If you would have looked at me at 12 and said, that guy's going to make all of his money from coaching, supplement stores, you know, a gym, all this stuff. It's like, what the hell? No, he's not. I could have stayed and probably been a millionaire by the time I was 20. So I was walking, but I had to do that within a certain construct of how my life was going to be structured for me, at what times things were going to be done for me, and when and how. And I always have been the type to leave the campfire, not stay around it. So I left and ventured out on my own. And, you know, that ended up now 15, 16 years later. I just got married recently, maybe a month ago. And I would say that resent just got resolved maybe about a month ago. It was a scaled down over the years. And I think we really put it to bed now when my dad is 70 years old. So it definitely has been a journey to get to that place. It took a lot of healing from my point of view as well, and his, and then conjointly together as well, you know.
Okay, now let's start transitioning then. So you move out on your own. How did you, I just want you to expound a little bit more, because obviously your story is unique compared to most of us. Now, how did you kind of figure things out in terms of you know, living arrangements and getting a job? You said you had to lie about your age, and then kind of from that point, walk us you know, through like your jobs that you had up to the point where you had that serious injury, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. So the answer is I probably won't walk you through everything I did, because at that age, whatever paid me $2 an hour more, I was gone. So and that took a little time because I lied about my age. I got a job at the potash mine and I was making actually decent money. So I had enough for what a 16-year-old should be making, let's say. And I had saved up prior to leaving home to have a little car. It wasn't much, but I had my own transportation. And that was paid off through some of the work that I did on the farm, as well as for other people, you know, different, you know, labor jobs that I would do. I've been working since I was 9 years old. So it's like, you want to go shovel grain? Our neighbor said he'll pay you $5 an hour cash to go do this job. It's like I was always working. And some of that was because if I had a chance to escape my dad, I would rather go shovel grain in someone's hot bin than stay at home with him. So fair enough. So I had a car. I had just rented a small 1-bedroom apartment, like, you know, at the time, I think it was $600. And I was scrambling, man, you know, like I was fasting as an obese person before it was cool, because my paycheck would run out and in 2 days I would have like 6 eggs in the fridge, and that's all you get till for 2 more days now. So, you know, when people ask me like, how'd you figure that out? I'm not sure. I'm a survivor. I always have been. I've had a difficult life and many experiences, and I was always taught not to quit. I was raised with that Spartan mentality. So by the time I was 17, this is a pretty interesting story, I got fired because they kept trying to ask me every 3 months. Someone would come and say, hey, we need your SIN number. We need all your stuff to like finish this file up. Look, you've been working here for a couple months and you keep saying, oh, it's coming, it's coming. And I would just brush it off till one day there was no more brush. It's like, no, we're figuring this out now. And then of course I have to come out and say, well, I've already been here about a year and I'm still not even quite 17 yet, by the way. And escorted me off site instantly. Like, give me your hat, give me your heart, get your shit, get off the property. You're fired now. So that was difficult. But luckily, I had made some contacts through various construction companies that had been working on in the potash site. So I had kind of known the union rep for commercial insulating. So I called him up. I asked if they needed a labor guy. Turns out this is kind of the way that unions work. They needed a 3rd-year insulator at Queen Elizabeth Power Station in Saskatoon. And I'm like, well, I've never done it before. Well, you're a 3rd year now. So I show up at the job site as a 3rd year. So I got a raise from getting fired. That's just super rare. It's like, what the hell? How did that happen? I've always been a very resourceful person, and I'm very good at managing people and psychology. I always had a gift for that, let's say. So I kind of would always have my next map drawn out, knowing that the one that I was in had plenty of snakes in it. You know, like when you're that age, it's like, I don't have a lot of this figured out. So I better be thinking, what if these problems all come to light? What will I do then? So that was probably the skill set that saved me. So for a while, I did different things. I did some, you know, between the ages of 17 and 20, I did various construction jobs. I did some equipment operating because I had, you know, a background in that. And through the equipment operating, that led me to equipment sales. And that's when I transitioned from like a general young man labor work to more of like sales roles. And as soon as I found that, my career started to excel. I'll be honest, by the time I was 21, I was making pretty good money. I was the type of person who was, with with no education at all, school of hard knocks life. I was, that job where I had the accident, I was managing a provincial territory for a company that's a pretty big company. So I was managing multiple employees that were double my age already. And kind of each job that I took, I went from that to a dealership setting where I worked up. The gentleman that I worked for had 7 dealerships. So I bounced around, started sales here, manager here, finance manager here, general manager here, till I worked my way up kind of that ladder. And then I took another job after that in the original field for the competitor for my first kind of sales career, but a bigger position. So I was Western Canadian territory manager, and then I ended up getting national territory manager. And about a year after doing that, I had also been, and this is going to expose some of my tactics, because I was a Canadian sales manager. I worked 7 to 3, Monday to Friday was my salaried hours. But I was traveling all over the country. I was never home. So I was home like 8 days a month. I would be in Manitoba, I'd be in Ontario, I'd be in Quebec, sometimes in the US, but mostly in Canadian provinces. I had already been sharing my own weight loss and fitness journey on social media for some time, and I had amassed a little bit of a following to that. So then I would just start reaching out. It would be like, oh, I'm going to Winnipeg. I would find all the best bodybuilders, coaches, whoever I could see that I could find that was in Winnipeg. I would message them, introduce myself, and say, I'd love to hit a workout from you. I'd love to learn from you, network a little bit. So I was traveling all over the country. And then after 3 o'clock, I would go and kind of build my own business with the company's money in some sense. Instead of just sitting in my hotel, I was just utilizing time, but they're already paying for all those trips that I wouldn't have been able to pay for. So about a year of doing that, I had already built up a decent online clientele with sort of an obesity, weight management demographic. And I was doing some one-on-one personal training. And I thought, hey, I'm going to quit my job and try this shit full time, which was a crazy thing to try then. In 2015, there wasn't really any. 2014, online coaching was still not really what it is now. And I left a pretty decent 6-figure salary, but it's like, quite a bit of stuff. And I just felt like I'm so passionate about this. It has to work because I'll make it work. So I left, and that's how I built sort of my first online coaching business. Essentially was the transition away from that.
All right, excellent. Now we're going to come back to some business talk, but let's get into some actual bodybuilding talk. Now you kind of already mentioned you had that accident, you get all your kind of vitals taken, and you have all kinds of health issues along with recovering from that fall, that accident. You get addicted to the pain pills, and then you find yourself in a gym lifting weights because you gotta do something, right? That's kind of what you said. And then you lose 150 pounds within 2 years, and then you find yourself on a stage competing. Now, how did you come across bodybuilding initially? You mentioned kind of coming across Arnold stuff initially, and then that led to Franco. And then you just said that you were connecting with these different people through your traveling job, sales job, reaching out to them to train with them and stuff like that. So how did you first get exposed to bodybuilding? And then walk us through the decision to step on a bodybuilding stage for that first time, because for a lot of people, that's a huge step, especially somebody like yourself who's, been obese your entire life, just lost 150 pounds. I'm sure that was a huge breakthrough moment for you. So expound on that, Dillon, please.
I'll be completely honest with you. You would think it would be a big decision and a difficult one to wrestle with for most people. Now, being that I was raised, that's the best way, ideologically, the way that I was spoken to as a young man, which did me a lot of benefit, but it did me a lot of things that I've had to heal out of. And I was spoken to like I was a Spartan. So it was like, you're a Phaneuf, you will just make more money because you're destined to make more money. you will be great because it's in your bloodline. So when I decided to lose weight and I started to see that it was possible, about halfway through that journey, I hired my first coach, who at the time was Mr. Chris Gethin. And at the time, he was starting Cage Muscle Supplements. At the same time, he started coaching me. So I got interested in the supplement stuff, which I now have businesses in. And I also got interested in the bodybuilding stuff because he's not like an IFBB pro bodybuilder, but he's been living a bodybuilding lifestyle forever, been very influential. And at the time he was like the head spokesperson for bodybuilding.com. He was, a very dominant player in sort of that first, what we would call bodybuilding influencer market. He was like the one that pioneered that back in the day when the video trainers were $200,000 productions. Not like now where everyone just has a video. I'm going after this to shoot a bunch of video with a professional video guy, but I didn't have to like rent a studio and make a script and, the whole thing. So I got a little bit to, you become a coach. When someone starts to coach, you end up developing a relationship. So I was just asking lots of questions, and I just thought it would be easy. Like in some sense, I was like, well, I'm already losing weight. I just have to keep getting shredded. And I have unlimited amounts of energy and willpower when I want something. So I'm like, I know that I can get to the point where I'm lean enough. And I think, again, just because I had such removed perspective, I didn't realize that I was going to be so small and not even be quite in condition after losing so much goddamn weight. Like, I'll be honest, my ego thought that's why it was such a hard pill to swallow. I thought, well, man, what a cool story. I'm going to show up and kick some ass. It's going to be sweet. And it was not that at all. And that's when I realized after that first one, holy fuck, this is not just like a fun thing that you just do in passing, like as a bucket list item. It's sort of where I changed my opinion on that. It's like, we could do a photo shoot. There's tons of things we could do that gives you almost the same external motivational drive, but not quite the same feeling. I just really wasn't ready to be competitive at all. And I'll be honest with you, based on my starting point, I'm not sure that I ever will be. Like when you start lifting weights at 22 years old, and, like if I just stopped training and I ate 2,000 calories a day, like a normal healthy diet, I would be like a 135-pound guy. Like I'm very small, so it's not that it's not possible by any sense, but I started to realize like, oh, those games you played in the first 2 quarters of your life or first quarter of your life may sort of disrupt even your best dreams and visions for yourself. And that's why I really started to get inspired by guys like Neil Hill and Haney Rambod, which I think it's funny that Haney's kind of coming back into popularity after I saw him on Chris's first video trainer. Like that's how I got to see him. He was like an expert, at the time on this video trainer, had his like FST7 stuff. And I started to look into their careers and realize like, well, they're not pro bodybuilders and they coach a bunch of pros and they never have been. And they, never really were great competitors per se, based on the potential of competing. And I thought like, based on my mindset and the way that I seem to be able to solve problems, I probably have a huge avenue of value to athletes. So of course I'm still developing my physique, and I have been for 10 years, and I've improved it a lot and I keep improving it. But I never wanted like my physique to be the thing that's like, yeah, hire me because of this. Because I knew that it would be a shitty marketing decision. And B, I don't think that's, even to this day, even if I was 50 pounds more muscle, most of the clients that have hired me wouldn't care if that difference existed or not, because it's not what they were coming for, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, let's transition then into kind of the coaching realm. And then I want you to talk a little bit more about, some of the other businesses that you're involved with the supplements and things like that, because just from the outside perspective, looking at your Instagram and things like that, and kind of like some things that you've kind of mentioned lightly up to this point, Dillon, you have multiple avenues that you're involved in terms of income and, growing and businesses. So I want you to first of all kind of start with the coaching thing, and then just talk about how, the coaching has maybe opened some doors for you to expand business wise, and what's kind of like your long-term vision for yourself in terms of business.
Sure. So yeah, like that's why I love bodybuilding so much, because at a core root sense, bodybuilding has given me everything and turned me into the man, alongside some hard journeys and learning a lot more about other subjects, let's say conjunctly. But it's one of the roots that have helped me develop to the person that I am. And I know without it, I would not be here. Just, my business partner looked at me one time not too long ago and he says, Dillon, it's pretty cool what you've done, because you've basically built um, a nice size sort of nest egg, let's say, in the fitness industry for yourself with nothing more than tenacity, buttons, and a smile. Which is, he was looking at me and, like as a 205-pound guy, it's not like you're cracking the sidewalk and people are stopping to take pictures of you. And, you're not, it's like you're a generalist, kind of master generalist across many things, and you figured out how to make that work for you. So I have a big respect for like the discipline and the extra responsibility that bodybuilding has taught me to carry into the other areas of my life. As I told you, when I left my first corporate career, I worked up an online coaching business to about as much as I could handle. I was out of time. So I had scaled that business to as large as I could get. I was enjoying it. And at the time I thought that was what I wanted to do. I was like, this is so cool. I've been able to do this. I make, pretty good money and etc. I'm helping people. My now business partner at the time had given me an opportunity, or presented an opportunity rather, that we should open a supplement store in the city that I live in right now. And because of that, he said, Dillon, like, we're going to be investing a lot of money in this, and you've never run a retail store. And I think you should maybe not do coaching, because I think we should focus on this, being that it's going to be technically a more profitable business over time. But I don't want to pressure you into, killing something that you've worked very hard for. So what do you think? I thought about it a lot. It was painful, but I thought, you know what, I'm going to stop coaching. So after 4 years or 3 years of chasing that dragon, I stopped it all. I let go of all my clients, went right down to about 5 clients I literally couldn't get rid of no matter what I did. No matter, I told them, like, I can't even do check-ins every 2 weeks. And they were just like, I don't care. No matter what problems I thought I would put in their way, they just wouldn't leave. So they stayed around. Over the next 2.5, 3 years, I didn't have any clients, but I found a newfound passion for sort of my own physique transformation as well as education. And because I had monetarily done okay for myself up until that time, I was pouring money into education, like lots. Like I was doing mentorships with some of the best coaches. I've been coached by some of the best coaches, taken some of the best in-person and or online education that I think you can find in the bodybuilding aspect. That's all very popularized today. So I really elevated my education level. Now the store had gotten to a point where it was kind of, I worked myself out of a job. I've now hired managers, staff, it's doing better. So I don't really have a need to be standing there for 12 hours a day like when I was first opened. So I told my wife, now a girlfriend at the time, I said to her, I put all this money into education. I've, put on 15, 20 pounds of muscle myself over the last basically 3 years. I feel like I really want to coach people again, just because it gives me something to do. And it feels like it's not a waste of money and time learning all this shit to kind of just keep it all floating around my head. And I wanted to play with it. It's like a toy to me. It's like, is this shit really worth the money I paid? Is it, all that type of stuff. And I said, I really haven't posted on social media for the last couple of years because I wasn't coaching. So I wasn't marketing myself at all. And I said, social media moves really fast and I'm old now. I'm a dinosaur. I've been doing this for a long time. So maybe you and I could get 10 clients or something, or I could, but we as a team could get 10 clients and, we could go on a holiday with that money and I could help some people and win-win. I put out I made one story and within 1 week I had 30 clients. And then it started to just really escalate up from there. So then it was like, okay, that turned into another business now. And I did that for about 4 or 5 months. And Braden Miller, who I think, would be really fun for you to have on as well, my coach and business partner now, he was my coach at the time. And he said, hey, I really want to take my brand to the next level. I'd love to have you come on the team, be part of this. We'll build something of value, create a team, create a movement. Let's become Canada's best bodybuilding team. It's open for the taking. We just have to build it and take it. And you're the guy I want to do this with. So that's kind of when we ended up, partnering up in some sense and building a team and really taking the vision off that we've created over the last year. And since I started my first store, I have my fingers in, we have about 15 locations across Canada now. So I'm involved in more than just one. We're doing a gym right away that's set to open in the spring, as well. So there's just like, as you see, everything I've touched is just kind of spread off to another thing, which is fun because I like business just like I like growing a physique. It's not so much, money and stuff is all great and that's fine, but it's more so a scorecard of how well you're playing the game and how much value you're creating, and the sides of problems you're solving is relative to how much you'll get paid, right? So that's the way I always like to look at it. So I've been very grateful that fitness has given back to me as much as I put into it in some sense.
Just so you know, Braden has been on the podcast. He's a cool dude. So,
oh, dude, I didn't even know that. Jeez, I should go and listen to it.
Yeah, super cool people. Now, you mentioned that you just recently got your first pro athlete in terms of like a client. Is that correct?
Yep, that is correct. Yeah.
Okay. If you don't want to say the name, that's fine, but talk about that. And then in terms of the coaching side of things, Dillon, is that kind of a goal of yours to really start working with more IFBB pro athletes?
Yeah. So, like I told you, and that's kind of what I was foreshadowing when I told you I was standing in the gym, basically still obese, looking at the guys that would be like national level competitors. Probably they were realistically bodybuilders or classic, something like that size. I don't remember exactly, and thinking like, that's the motherfuckers I want to be training right now. Like now I wanted that 10 years ago, but I also was smart enough to know there's 0% chance you just jump from where I was to there. I knew that it was going to be, I've had a 10-year plan. It's like, I know that I was going to have to transform 500 obesity clients, 300 lifestyle athletes. And then I ended up getting into functional health because I do some of that as well. So like autoimmune disorder, and that's how I actually got my foot in the door for bodybuilding coaching. Is the bro coaches were fucking up, specifically females. Then the female would finish the show, quit with that coach, and have amenorrhea, hairs falling out, post-cycle disasters, post-show disasters. They came to me, someone like me, to fix all that. And then I got realizing that, well, if I'm going to be fixing this stuff, I'll at least break the stuff and then I'll fix it myself. Like I should be doing the coaching too, because I don't see any magic that they're providing that I can't provide with the education that I have and the experience that I have. So obviously doing that over the years, and I had some opportunities to work with bodybuilders along the way. It's just few and far between, right? One person gives you a shot, and that's kind of what's ended up happening over the last year and a half is, based on my content or something someone's listened to, it's like, hey, that's a little bit different perspective. I've never heard someone talk about athlete psychology like that. I've never heard about someone talking about safer PED cycle design. I've never heard about someone talk about training programming like that. And then they want, we just end up having a conversation. And that's actually how I got my first pro athlete. She's a wellness competitor. I won't say her name just because I didn't ask her, so I don't want to throw her under the bus. I think she'd have no problem with it. But so we had a conversation about she had just moved away from a coach that she was working with, and she only reached out to me because this is where all of a sudden something clicked for me. She reached out to me to ask me to maybe help her find a coach. And when she asked me this, I took that at face value. I certainly wasn't expecting it was going to be me. I actually went and I said, well, let's talk a little bit about what you weren't getting, what you feel you were missing with your last experience. And then we'll talk about what you do want. So we just got on a call to talk about that. And my sort of plan was to push her to Braden because he's coached many pro athletes and turned many people pro. And through within about a 10-minute conversation, I had built out a map to solve all the problems that she had with her previous experience and how we would not run into those same problems and some of the things I thought we could improve. And by the end of the call, she was like, I want to hire you. And I'll be honest, I was kind of like, me, really? Me, okay, yeah, me, yeah, fuck yeah, me, let's do it. And, that's when, and knowing that I have Dr. Scott Stevenson, Dr. Dwayne in my corner. Those are two of my mentors, and I can ask them anything at any time, so I have 2 PhD level kind of coaches and influences. I have Braden and our full team Miller people alongside all the other networking I have. So between my own knowledge and the sort of exert knowledge that I have from my circle, it was like no problem at all. We went through our first enhancement season together, and I'll be honest, it was her best improvement season yet and the healthiest she's been. So as I've gone over the last year, I've really started to work up my confidence. And yes, I have about 30 contest preps this year, which is like 10x my biggest year ever. So this year, and I like to put myself in positions where it's back up against the wall in some sense. I'm either going to come out really moving forward into that, or I'll be clawing my fingers into the side of a hill going like, oh, fuck, you bit off more than you can chew. And now that's going to resonate in the marketplace negatively. But I'm okay to take, like, I can look at that teeter totter and go, you know what, I'm just going to make sure that it falls the right way. I'll do everything I can. And if I don't, I'll take the consequences on the chin like a man, but I know that I have the capability. And that's where our team is headed, is I want to be coaching the best athletes in the world. I look at people like Matt Jansen. I spent a lot of time with him. I look at, guys like Cameron Cheek, Justin Mahaley, all the guys I've been lucky enough to spend some time with, get to know and talk to, Braden. And I don't stand around them thinking that I can't do what they do, I guess. And I hope that doesn't sound egotistical, but when I'm around them, I'm like, yeah, I need the experience. I need some things, but the human potential is certainly there. And there's some things I have gifts in that I know I can stand alone on even. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. Okay. Now we're going to start wrapping things up, but I do want to talk about mindset, because on your Instagram, you have, physique and mindset coach. That's how I introduce you kind of as a professional introduction. Let's talk about the mind. Why do you consider yourself a mindset coach? Why is mindset important? Obviously, I know some of these, but I just want you to really expound on some of these questions, Dillon, because I think, a lot of times as bodybuilders specifically, and as coaches, we neglect the importance of the mindset, right? Because the body follows the mind. And I'm a huge proponent of that myself. But again, so why do you consider yourself a mindset coach? How did you kind of come across the power of the mind, and walk us maybe through some of your personal experiences and explorations in terms of your own mind, and how that kind of parlays into now being a mindset coaching, helping other people with their thoughts and their mind?
Sure. That's a great question. So I guess I stumbled across it from two sort of avenues. One being a very nerdy, weird child. So by the time I was like 9 years old, I was reading things like Marcus Aurelius Meditations. I was reading Letters from the Past from Plato. I really was obsessed with Greek mythology. I was obsessed with mythology, history, anything I could get my hands on. And I started to notice a pattern. So I ended up liking, I guess, shortly and simply put, I found philosophy very early. And that helped me navigate it as even a very young person who couldn't grasp the full understanding of the things that I grasp now, navigate some of the difficult things that I had to navigate in my early life. So it was like a grounding for me, right? And then I also had like a religious sense. So I had purpose and meaning and philosophy grounded into my mindset very young. And it sort of hit me on a reverse end when I started to really put my life together. I would say about my early to mid 20s. And I started to realize that, like, if I keep working at something, I'm not exactly sure what yet, but I was starting to see some minor successes and feel the person I could become. I changed my body. And as a consequence of changing my body, I kept every sort of stage. So let's say there's 10 stages from me going from completely obese to the shape that I'm in now. Every stage, I had to wrestle with a dragon in my mind that was holding me back to getting the next physique. And I started to look into a lot of other types of psychological based coaching, more so in the professional athlete and the sports realm. And that's when I realized most of the stuff that the bodybuilding industry is promoting is complete nonsense. It actually is not how great athletes get coached. It's never has been how great athletes gets coached. It's because it's been such a small niche industry that only allows I should change. In the past, the bodybuilding was drawing the most narcissistic type of personalities, the most volatile personalities. And that type of coaching was proponed from the top down because everything moves from the top down. And then I started to find people like later in my career, finding people like Matt starting to talk about how he would pull things from football. So I obsessed about the psychological literature on cognitive behavioral improvement, never mind from an athletic standpoint, just cognitive behavioral improvement, and really what the things are that help people improve, which is something like we derive positive emotion from creating a map that will then lead us to the perceived target of value. And the map obviously has to get adjusted as you start moving. But each step that you take, you'll derive positive emotion chemicals. And that is what subsedes willpower. And in fact, I noticed in the fitness industry, a lot of times what's happening is programs and protocols were designed for you to use willpower until not if, when it run out, and then deal with that problem at the time. Versus I started to open up communication to my athletes a lot, like, hey, I don't want to overstep. I'm not some sort of psychological professional. But if you're having a bunch of problems in your life as an amateur competitor, let's say, above that are outside of the fitness area, it's not a problem with your diet, it's not a problem with your, your training, but you're having sort of a bunch of life crises above that, those things will suffer, whether you want them to or not. So we have to figure out how to arrange those problems above in a better order and or make better maps around them to solve those problems so you can unlock the next level of your fitness. And as I've coached more and more, I realized this to be true. And I would hear things. And by the way, 2 years ago, when I got back into coaching or just under, and I started to talk about this stuff, there was a lot of pushback on this, and there probably still is. I had a lot of old boys clubs saying like, my athletes don't need any of that stuff. I just tell them what to do and they just do it. Guess what? After I've gotten some of those athletes come across my ledger, yeah, they don't need it, but they certainly will like it. It's just that you weren't able to provide it to them. There's a difference between not needing it and you don't have the skill set to do it for them. So that's where I just noticed. And then noticing how I get rehired and who hires me, it was like, that's where people, really seem to enjoy my service. That's the difference, because at the end of the day, training is training, diet's diet. You can skin cats 100 different ways. I try and coach the person that's in front of me as a person, not as an entity of a bunch of protocols strung together, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Now you've mentioned a few people like Dr. Scott Stevenson and Matt Jansen. In terms of, I just we're setting aside bodybuilding right now. I just want to focus on like just the human being, right? The aspect of growth as a human being. Do you feel, Dillon, that it's important for a individual human being to grow, to be surrounded by others who are maybe ahead of them, better than them, smarter than them, a better physique than them? Like, is it important to, have that community around you to kind of propel you forward and upward? And then also, do you feel like, it's important to have some sort of mentorship or mentors in your life also for that human growth?
Yeah, so I think that there's nothing more important, actually. And I sound like a kind of an old boomer and getting a little cliche now as I age, because in my mid-20s, I probably would have answered that very differently before I had taken advantage of this. And I'll tell you right now, if someone was to look at my personal trajectory and growth as a business person, as an athlete, as a coach in the last 2 years, I've been able to like 10x everything I had done in the previous 8 years prior. Some of that is because of wisdom and understanding how the games are played a little bit better, but most of that is from being surrounded by people, that have the same aspirations, that have skill sets in certain areas that are much better than mine, and or learning from people who are way smarter than me. So for instance, most of the time if I wasn't careful, what would happen to me in my mid-level career, I would hear all the time, like, well, you're so smart, you know all these things. And that starts to perpetuate into your mind like a poison. And then when I started to get out of that and kill my ego into my late mid-20s, when I started to, find some different healing pathways and trying to sort my shit out and become a man, so to speak, I started to realize that that's holding me back, that kind of egotistical piss poor attitude. I remember getting on calls, like reading blood work and things, I'm very in tune with. I've done a lot of functional health cases, done a lot of education. I'll get on a call with Dr. Scott or Dr. Wayne Jackson, and it's like, oh, I'm actually no, absolutely zero, nothing, zero. Like, and I love that now. I've accustomed myself to that so much, I seek it. Like if I get too comfortable not feeling stupid for too many weeks in a row, I'll try and find someone to make someone that can make me feel that way, because it makes me feel like I get positive emotion from that now, because it's an indicator of area towards improvement. Because I think, well, who would you become if you stopped doing this stupid thing and upregulated the smart thing that this person could be showing you instead? And I start to scale that into a long-term vision over 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. And it gets very exciting. It's like, wow, imagine what I could be. Imagine what I could become. I'm a very imaginative person in some sense.
Awesome, man. One last thing I want to touch on is kind of like the functional side of your coaching and kind of your focus with your athletes, because that's something also that I'm very fascinated by and interested in, and kind of trying to improve in my own personal life in terms of, offerings for clients and things like that. So talk about just, I mean, first of all, explain to everybody so we kind of understand, like, what do you mean by functional? And then how do you kind of incorporate the functional health into your coaching so that your athletes are the best that they can be?
Sure. So functional health is a category that we've kind of come up with in some sense. It's kind of made up. Realistically, it's just a designation so that clients and customers and coaches kind of understand what type of casework you're going to be doing. But anything, my definition of it is functional health is where the goal is to improve something other than the physiological being. So that could be some psychological aspects, which usually end up, for sure, no matter which athlete. But more so than that, it ends up being like 3 different categories. It could be, if you're talking about a weight loss client, it could be, what are the habits and sort of minor micro habits we have to clean up all the pillars in your life, to let, just like when you're going through AA, you don't hang around the same people, you don't go to the same places. And there's a reason for that, because your life is built, you're a byproduct of how you've set up the pillars of your life. If we look all the way on the complete opposite end of that, being a competitor, maybe a competitor's done some PED cycles, to get ready for a show or a cycle. They've dieted very hard, sleep has suffered, etc. Well, we take either one of those clients, we look at their blood work. Well, there's probably some problems that need addressing. So anytime that would be, I would consider functional, is like when we need to improve sort of the metabolic and or disease state. And sometimes that can come from autoimmune cases where it's not the person's doing per se, like whether that's a colitis case, MS, rheumatoid arthritis, Hashimoto's, amenorrhea. I've worked with all of those types of clients, and that's probably some of where my more difficult casework lies. Actually, bodybuilding is not the most difficult type of coaching at all, and that's kind of what's funny about that, is it's the functional work is way harder, because usually there's a psychological root that's causing the problem alongside an actual physiological root, and both of those together can be quite the process to solve. So anytime someone's coming in, is maybe they're looking to get off medication. This has happened before too. Like, hey, I'm on cholesterol medication, I'm on high blood pressure medication, and I may be on an antidepressant. Do you think that if we start working on, and I'm overweight, do you think if we start working on my nutrition, my lifestyle, my stress management, do you think it's possible for these things to come off, obviously in conjunction with advice from my medical doctor? And it's like, yeah, probably, or at least we can cross some of those bridges. So that's kind of what I would deem as functional. Now, taking that into, I do a lot less of that work now, because as we're talking about, my roster is starting to become a lot more contest prep. And if it's a lifestyle client, even the lifestyle clients I'm attracting are people that like seriously want to change their physique. Like it might be a gentleman that's like a firefighter and like, no, I want to be jacked for that calendar. I want to look good, and it's not kind of like just, I want to be a little bit less overweight. So we start looking at things that we can pull from their biofeedback. How's your blood pressure trends? How's your sleep scores? How's your blood glucose? How is your resting heart rate? How is your psychological feedback to me as an athlete with some experience, right? Because I think a lot of times coaches don't involve their athletes collaboratively quite enough. And by the way, I'm not saying for coaches to allow them to make protocol changes and decisions. That's why you're there as a coach. But I do think, for instance, it's naive for me to take on someone. Like when I took on my first pro athlete, I'm not going to sit there and tell her like, no, everything I say is what's best and you have no say. She's done multiple shows before me, got her pro card without me. So why would I fucking think I'm so special to come in and have all of the answers when she's the one that can obviously be very in tune with her body, give me the feedback, and that helps us put a map together. And again, going back to the psychological literature, when you allow someone to have a say in how the building is designed, they're more likely to keep care of it, using a very good analogy. They'll be more manageful, they'll be more responsible on the pathway there, and they'll also have a feeling of sort of what's supposed to happen on the way there. So if there's problems, they bring it up. Because I'll finish with this, my sense always is, if there's a problem, I want to know about it now. I don't want to know, and this is sort of why I make myself highly available. It's not like just message me only on your check-in day and all this shit. That just is a recipe for disaster, in my opinion, because what it does is it's not if, it's when the client at any level gets to a roadblock and they're coming to a four-way stop, they don't know which way to go. They have a 50-50 shot of either getting it semi-right the way that I would have advised them, or completely doing it wrong. And then waiting 5 or 6 days to figure that out produces so much negative emotion that the week is basically a write-off. So I don't mind if it's 9 o'clock at night, someone messages me and says, hey, I'm at this roadblock jam here. I don't know what to do with this. Should I change my training? Should I change my rest day? Like whatever it is, we just take the stress and put it all on me so that you can carry out the protocols that we've both deemed that are going to carry you to the target of value so that we can both succeed.
Perfect. All right, Dillon. I think that's a great place to end it. I know you've got a lot of other things going on after this. So I just want to say thank you so much for coming on to the podcast, sharing a little bit of your personal story, your fitness story up to this point, man. I really appreciate it. Okay.
I appreciate you, man. It was a really good conversation, really good questions. And I think keep working hard here, and you're in the makings of creating something pretty cool that you know, even more cool than you've already created. And if there's anything I can ever do for you, please let me know.
Yeah, for sure. Before I do a quick outro and I let you go, Dillon, I would like you, if you have any final thoughts, any final words, or if you have any shout outs or anything like that, that you kind of want to leave with us, if you want to make sure you give us your Instagram, how people can connect with you in terms of coaching, I'm going to turn it over to you. And then once you're done, I'll do a quick outro and that'll be a wrap. Okay.
Sure. So, you know, I'm not much of a pusher, let's say, but you can find me on Instagram. It's just my name, Dillon Phaneuf, really simple. Or Team Miller Elite is our kind of our coaching page where you can see some of our client results and all that stuff. And you'll find all of our coaches there as well. I do a little bit of YouTube stuff, but nothing too crazy. You know, I like to do we do some podcast stuff ourselves. So obviously we have a Team Miller podcast that's available as well. You know, I do a little bit of coaching mentorship as well. I take on 10 mentees at a time to help them build their businesses. And that's a very fun aspect to my business alongside coaching athletes. So, you know, if anyone ever has any questions or anything like that, feel free to reach out. And other than that, it's been a blast chatting with you here.
Awesome. All of you who are tuning in to another episode of Behind the Muscle podcast, I just want to say thank you so very much. If you guys have not done so already, make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube in regards to Behind the Muscle podcast. And then also take this episode with Dillon. Make sure you please share it on your Instagram stories. Tag Dillon, tag Behind the Muscle podcast so that we know that you listened specifically to this episode and found great value in it, in which I know you did. And then finally, I will leave you all with this. Remember, behind the muscle, there's always a story. We'll catch you guys later.